In this episode of Cycling Tours, I will explore the cycling network within the western sector of Ang Mo Kio. Greetings folks, Transit Evolution is here to have a look at the cycling network in the western part of Ang Mo Kio today, starting at Lentor and ending at Yio Chu Kang MRT station. I would like to start by pointing out that the bus stop is located much further away from the MRT exit than a taxi pickup and drop-off point, which makes a bus train transfer one heck of a pain. Anyway, because of the way the network has been laid out here, with many branches and missing links, this video will not flow as coherently as the videos for Ang Mo Kio South and East, but I'll do my best to give you a full look at the cycling network here. The first 5 minutes or so of this video will be spent looking at the paths surrounding the future Lentor Hills estate, a private residential enclave. I'm currently travelling along Lentor Drive. Some of the paths feel a bit off, like this particular one under the covered linkway, which leaves little room for pedestrians to walk. Moving further along, we encounter trees which are encroaching into the clear width of the cycling path. These are some typical issues which tend to arise when nobody is using the cycling path, under the limited network here. That's perhaps because the paths were mainly designated in tandem with the completion of Lentor MRT station, so while it's good to see that they exist, they aren't part of a usable network at the moment and don't extend very far from the station. In fact, it ends once I pass these other exits of Lentor MRT station. Just as a heads up, this journey will be followed by a traversal through the cycling paths of Neighbourhood 1, Mayflower, where I pass the Mayflower MRT station, before I move on to Neighbourhood 6, Yio Chu Kang, ending at Yio Chu Kang MRT station. For now, I'll take a brief detour along this shared path next to Lentor Hills Road. This space next to the MRT station will see a mixed-use development by the name of Lentor Modern, with private housing on top of a mall, supermarket, and childcare centre. There are more construction sites up ahead, but the shared path ends here, and therefore I will not be heading any further. Passing a much older Thomson Grove, the cycling path turns into a shared path along a covered linkway, which was only built to be so lengthy because apparently it is easier to build a covered linkway than to relocate bus stops along Yio Chu Kang Road, which would have done a much better job at facilitating bus train transfers here. I guess at least we get a shared path here, but something is wrong if the journey from the bus stop to the train station is an entire bicycle ride away. Beyond the bus stop though, all we have is a footpath. The aeration slabs used for part of the footpath provide a hint of the mature trees which used to be here, providing good shade but also being in the way of pedestrians, and making it a pain for wheelchair users to navigate around. Nowadays, footpaths wouldn't be built like this. Trees would instead be planted along a dedicated green verge. By the way, I'm only travelling along this footpath so that I can give you a glimpse of the short cycling path segment on this other side of Yio Chu Kang Road. There was no barrier-free way to cross the road at an earlier point than the intersection with Lentor Gardens. We'll pass a few Certis Cisco auxiliary police officers doubling as active mobility enforcement officers here, and I guess it's a good thing that I didn't get stopped today. I believe now is a good time to describe what I am about to encounter next as I approach the new town portion of Ang Mo Kio, entering neighborhood 6. It's a sunny weekday afternoon today, with a temperature of nearly 35 degrees Celsius, quite a bit hotter than the average maximum temperature in Singapore. The good thing about Ang Mo Kio Avenue 4 is the very ample tree cover along the roadway. It sure does lead to quite a bit of leaf clutter on the shared path which I'm traveling on, but the trees and their big canopies do help to alleviate a bit of the heat that discourages people from cycling as a means of travel here. Traveling southbound, you will encounter a minor downslope as you pass Yio Chu Kang View, the neighborhood center of Neighborhood 6, where work is ongoing to realign the shared path. I will have to make a detour through this pavilion because the cycling path on the opposite side of this access road is aligned at a very odd angle. This may not be immediately apparent for people who are not familiar with this area. For now though, the journey shall continue amidst this sea of uniform housing blocks as I move southwards through the housing blocks built towards the tail end of the original development phase of Ang Mo Kio back around 1980. Crossing Ang Mo Kio Avenue 4, I enter Neighborhood 1, where I face my biggest challenge yet. You see, while the heat isn't helping, the biggest problem with cycling in this neighborhood is the topography. It may surprise you to know this, but the western side of Ang Mo Kio sees some of the steepest elevation changes in the public housing area, especially along Ang Mo Kio Avenue 4, on the approaches to Mayflower MRT station. This is worse than Bukit Batok or Bukit Panjang, which themselves have the Malay word for hill in their name. And it does make cycling without power assist very difficult. On a shared bicycle, it would be hard to pedal beyond 10 km per hour upslope. I did some rough measurements of the terrain here, and found that the gradient here is approximately between 1:15 and 1:20, much more than the 1:25 which is comfortable for a cyclist to cycle over long distances. In other words, for every meter of forward travel, I climb a height of 5 to 7 centimeters. This continues for 400 meters, during which time I climbed from an elevation of 13 to 33 meters above sea level, a height of 7 stories. This is not going to change anytime soon, and will admittedly make cycling a less viable mode of transport here. Immediately after I reach Mayflower MRT station, next to Kebun Baru Community Club, I pass over the apex of the hill, and things go downhill from here on. One can easily freewheel beyond the speed limit of the cycling path, which is 25 km per hour, so I have to apply brakes the whole way down, as I descend a height of 16 meters towards the Bishan Ang Mo Kio Park, where the Kallang River lies. Kebun Baru Heights and Kebun Baru View, the housing precincts to my left and right, are named as such for a reason. Crossing Ang Mo Kio Street 11, I find myself passing by the last of the 7 exits that Mayflower MRT station has. The journey through those underground linkways is surely long, but the air-conditioned walk along a wide, spacious and flat walkway probably beats walking up and down this hill under the scorching sun. I'll briefly cycle along the cycling path of Ang Mo Kio Avenue 3, which I covered in the video for the southern sector of Ang Mo Kio. We'll have a look at the stretch of Ang Mo Kio Avenue 1 between Avenue 3 and Upper Thomson Road shortly. We are now at the intersection of Ang Mo Kio Avenues 1 and 3, where for the first time back in 2016, a slip lane was removed to create more space for pedestrians and cyclists and boost safety. In the cycling tours video for Ang Mo Kio South, I will have turned left from here. Today, I will turn right, passing Ang Mo Kio Methodist Church towards Upper Thomson Road. You'll notice that some of the cycling paths in this vicinity are not completed yet. Some of it is caused by the construction of adjacent housing developments, such as the Kebun Baru Edge public housing precinct to my right. Even under such construction conditions, the pathway remains fairly well shaded by sprawling tree canopies, which is quite a great sight to have under such hot weather conditions. A noteworthy mention here is this curious site on my right, a block shaped like a clover. Completed in 1981, 259 Ang Mo Kio Avenue 2, the lone block of the Clover at Kebun Baru, is a landmark public housing tower at the western gateway into Ang Mo Kio. This was the only block with circular flats ever built, to create more variation in public housing that nurtures a stronger sense of identity. The flats were larger than the 5-room flats of its time. While praised for its unique design, many were concerned about the high cost needed to custom design and build furniture that accommodates the block's curved walls, and it is for that reason that Clover blocks aren't built anymore. Meanwhile, I also want to note that a cycling journey within the Bishan Ang Mo Kio Park will be much more seamless than along this cycling path here, as I will avoid some of the traffic lights along the way. this cycling path will end as I approach Upper Thomson Road. Unfortunately for cyclists who want to venture out of Ang Mo Kio through that road, this cycling path will not lead anywhere for quite a while. Next up, we have Ang Mo Kio Avenue 2. Under contract PR 193 awarded in 2018, work is currently in progress to finish up this part of the Ang Mo Kio cycling network here. The cycling paths along Ang Mo Kio Avenue 2 were meant to be completed last year in 2023. But like many cycling projects out there, they have been delayed and probably won't be ready for at least a few more months. For that reason, I've decided to just upload this video, although the network here is not yet completed. But you can see it slowly getting put together along a new pathway to my left. Eventually, that path will merge into this shared path which I'm traveling on. Along the way, you will observe that my camera is wobbling a little sideways, and that's because I find myself climbing up a pretty substantial 20 meters in elevation as I approach the landed housing estates of Shangri-La Park to my right and the Sembawang Hills estate to my left. So pardon me as I slow to a crawl of approximately 10 kilometers per hour here. It's not easy to go up and down the same hill many times within a video. Here, I pass the playground to my left and CHIJ St. Nicholas Girls' School to my right. This is where the footpath and cycling path splits, perhaps to avoid the needless chopping down of roadside trees over here. It then merges into a pedestrian priority zone as I pass a bus stop. I would say that it is a better design than painted lanes, but in the case of a landed housing environment, it does put pedestrians uncomfortably close to the non-lively streetscape. That is, the fencing for the terrace houses along St. Nicholas View. This makes the walking and cycling environment pretty cramped when compared to the road space which motorists have. But I suppose there are no plans to repurpose road space here, like how it's done within public housing estates, such as the examples I mentioned in my Ang Mo Kio East videos. This may be a more critical problem along hilly roads like this. You want cycling infrastructure to be bigger, so that cyclists have more room to deviate horizontally when pedaling upwards. Next, I'm going to pass Horizon Green and Horizon Gardens, two gated communities full of small terraced housing. From the way the fences are built, you can tell that I'm now on an extremely steep downslope, but I'll have to travel slowly as I approach the work site of a cycling path outside the gated communities, which haven't yet been built. By the end of this video, I will have nearly climbed the height of Bukit Timah Hill on a bicycle, as I fast forward through some paths which are either covered earlier or will be covering later. The next one I'm covering is this pretty steep and currently useless cycling path along the west side of Ang Mo Kio Avenue 4, which I suppose links Exit 1 and Exit 7 of Mayflower MRT station together, starting and ending at two car park roads. Yeah, that's not very useful. The rest of the cycling path here will be built sometime between now and 2026, under contract AM110. We then move along to Ang Mo Kio Street 13, next to the Kebun Baru Ling 1 public housing precinct. This street connects to an even higher height than the peak of Ang Mo Kio Avenue 4, rising by another 7 meters to about 40 meters above sea level. I would be surprised if you aren't panting by now, because I sure am. This may be why single-geared shared bikes are not very common here, being sparse in distribution compared to other towns. Perhaps you may want to opt for power-assisted bikes for last-mile travel if you live in this vicinity of Ang Mo Kio. As I pass a condominium by the name of The Panorama, we pass the crest of the street once again and move downwards. In this case, I find a split cycling path, but it is very narrow, perhaps a mere 1.5 meters wide, which won't comfortably accommodate two bicycles passing each other at all. Meanwhile, as I approach Ang Mo Kio Avenue 2, I want to note that the shared path is so steep that grooves were even engraved onto the pavement to facilitate the drainage of water and to increase the traction with bicycle wheels. At this point, I'm done with looking at the cycling paths within Neighbourhood 1. We'll have a look at the ones within Neighbourhood 6 later, but in the meantime, let's examine the Ang Mo Kio Avenue 5 Park Connector extension, one of the main east-west cycling routes in the northern part of Ang Mo Kio. This stretch of the Park Connector was completed fairly recently, sometime in 2022, and provides a connection with the old Upper Thomson Road Park Connector to its west, which itself was completed at the end of 2019 by repurposing a road lane and turning what was once a two-way road one-way. I'll have to make a pretty precarious road crossing here though. Gosh, the corner radius is humongous. There's plenty of greenery around this pretty suburban area, so I don't expect to see many, if any, people using this park connector for their last mile commutes here. But of course, people are living in the vicinity, such as those in the teacher's estate to my left or Thomson Hill to my right. In case it's not obvious, up until now I've been travelling along Yio Chu Kang Road, which predates the new town by at least 80 years. This makes the park connector a little bit of a misnomer, but the name becomes correct once I make a effortless right turn to Ang Mo Kio Avenue 5. It's only until now that the park connector runs past public housing, with the Kebun Baru Link 2 precinct to my right. Although not a neighborhood center, some of these blocks, like 181 Ang Mo Kio Avenue 5, come with commercial shops on the first floor instead of a void deck. This scattering of amenities across the town results in less of a need to move around Ang Mo Kio to meet your basic living needs. Meanwhile, you may have long realized that there's very little to talk about regarding the architecture in Ang Mo Kio. Sure, there's that lone clover-shaped block, but the rest is pretty boring. I suppose that's because of the emphasis on neatness and tidiness back in the 1970s, when the Housing Board had to build many housing flats fast, given the overwhelming backlog of demand for public housing back then. 12-story slab blocks facing the north-south orientation therefore dominate this town, and this fact can't be masked away by fanciful paint. This will be a common criticism of the Housing Board at the time, which will emphasize the design of towns and streets for a greater sense of identity in the 1980s, on top of previous considerations like flat layouts. I have just passed Mayflower Primary School, and Ang Mo Kio Town Garden West sits behind it further to my right. Park connectors aim to connect parks, and Town Garden West is one of the parks in question. Originally, the Ang Mo Kio Avenue 5 park connector would end at this intersection and continue south through Town Garden West along the Ang Mo Kio Park connector, which continues to Bishan Ang Mo Kio Park. Whatever I cycled thus far is new, and whatever I've yet to cycle is old. However, the construction of the north-south corridor has decimated some of these park connector linkages here. That's the nature of mega projects. A corridor which aims to enhance cycling connectivity is worsening it a lot more for the time being. The original section of the Ang Mo Kio Avenue 5 park connector would continue along here and form an integral part of the central urban loop, which was completed in 2015. Of course, today the path is in bits and pieces due to all the construction work going on here, but the totally reassuring map board by MParks and the coast-to-coast trail signs serve to guide the way. I shall now head to Ang Mo Kio Avenue 8 as I make my way to the last leg of this video, featuring the cycling paths of Neighbourhood 6. To continue the journey along Ang Mo Kio Avenue 5, check out the video for the eastern sector of Ang Mo Kio. This path is currently being reconstructed under contract AM110 and will serve as a part of the Ang Mo Kio Avenue 8 linear park, connecting Yio Chu Kang MRT station with Bishan Road, extending upon a 1-kilometer park connector under the North-South Line Viaduct, which was built back in 2016. This path passes by Nanyang Polytechnic to my right, with the former and future campus of Anderson Serangoon Junior College to my left. Cycling through the diverted paths around Yio Chu Kang MRT station sure isn't ideal, and I should have just not shown this to you and pretend that this doesn't exist. However, these are the paths that last mile bicycle commuters have to negotiate through to get between the MRT station and their place of residence. They may not yet be official cycling paths, but I have to fill in the missing links to see if the connection to Yio Chu Kang MRT station worked. The construction works here began sometime after the contract for it was awarded at the end of 2018, and at the rate at which things are going, the road tunnel will only be completed in 2029. Only after 2029 will the surface streets here be repurposed to prioritize walking and cycling. If we are generous and assume that takes a year, the construction works here would be done in 2030. This means that the existing bicycle commuters out of Yio Chu Kang station will have to negotiate through a web of unintuitive pathways like this for at least another 6 years, long after the rest of the cycling network in Ang Mo Kio is completed. Unfortunately, the project that will make Ang Mo Kio truly car light is also the same project hindering it from making walking and cycling easy today. Of course, it will also be a false dichotomy between having this project and having negative intra-town cycling experiences today, or not having this project and losing the potential of an inter-town trunk cycling route. It's just a matter of priorities. The temporary traffic schemes used here are, after all, able to maintain 6 lanes of road space for motor vehicles, despite the massive and daunting scope of construction works here. Traffic is also flowing pretty smoothly here as I approach the evening rush hour. If a temporary shared path of appropriate width is carved from the roadway, like the one we saw in the video for the eastern sector of Pasir Ris, the conditions for cyclists would have been much more bearable. But for now, thanks to the convoluted pedestrian circulation schemes used here, the cycling network for Neighbourhood 6 is mostly a white elephant. I will still attempt to probe for the way to get to Yio Chu Kang station from that neighbourhood, which you'll see in the coming minutes, but I'll just warn you in advance that it's a mess. It will be more advisable for those adopting a bike-train model combination to head to Lentor station instead. I'll make a mid-block crossing here to show you a cycling path along Ang Mo Kio Avenue 9, which should appear anytime now once I pass the frontage of the future public housing precinct of Yio Chu Kang Beacon. This is an infill development in Neighbourhood 6, surrounded by a much larger precinct of Yio Chu Kang Heights. May I have your attention to what's going on the left? You may notice the presence of a shared path circuit wrapping around 621 Ang Mo Kio Avenue 9 as part of an Ang Mo Kio Town Council initiative. However, such paths are poorly connected to the intra-town cycling network and will not be covered in this video. I'm now looping back to the last street yet to be covered, Ang Mo Kio Street 61, where bizarrely a dedicated cycling path is built next to a shared path. This short section of it is narrow, likely violating the 2-meter minimum width as outlined by the design guide. After passing a driveway though, we get a less substandard path, though it seems like an afterthought to be squeezed into the street layout when the street was reconfigured to become a silver zone. The result is a lot of visual clutter, with a pretty messy layout full of weird kinks and janks, but functionally I guess it theoretically works, though there are plenty of deviations I have to make as a biker. The cycling path ends here, dumping me in a practical dead end. To end this video at Yio Chu Kang MRT station, I have to negotiate through some void decks and a convoluted pathway system. Just as a disclaimer, the pedestrian circulation plans used in construction projects are temporary and subject to frequent changes. Therefore, do take this video with a pinch of salt if you were not watching it when it was just uploaded, as there may have been severe changes made to the pathways since then. In the meantime, I would like to summarize my opinions on the network here, and I would say that it is a lot less favorable in the western part of Ang Mo Kio when compared to the south or the east. Of course, the heat isn't helping today, but two main issues compromise the network here. The first is the very steep terrain that is not conducive to non-motorized pedal power, or at least single-geared shared bikes, unless you have a pretty elaborate multi-gear system on your bicycle. Yes, the terrain is steeper than even Bukit Panjang. This is not solvable. We can't simply flatten a hill that's already full of public housing. So if you live in the vicinity, make sure you have a bicycle that's more appropriate for such steep terrain. Second, the construction of the Cross Island Line and the North-South Corridor continues to hinder Ang Mo Kio's car-like endeavour. Though they are ultimately beneficial to the residents here, providing more modes of travel by the MRT or active mobility, the inconveniences caused by their inadequate circulation plans for non-motorized modes will likely hinder the uptake of cycling here till 2030. As I pass the alighting berths of Yio Chu Kang bus interchange, I end this episode of Cycling Tours. How do you find cycling in Ang Mo Kio? Let your thoughts run free in the comment section below. Subscribe and tap the notification bell if you have not done so, and feel free to use the super thanks function of YouTube. With that, I'm Transit Evolution signing off.